The kitchen faucet had been dripping for 3 weeks. 3 weeks of that steady ping, ping, ping against the stainless steel sink. I'd been putting off fixing it, just like I'd been putting off a lot of things lately. But Saturday morning seemed like the perfect time to tackle home repairs, especially with Lindsey taking Sophie to her sister's place for the weekend. I was elbow deep under the sink, wrench in hand, when my phone rang. "Daddy?" The voice was small, scared, barely above a whisper. "Sophie, baby, what's wrong?" I dropped the wrench and sat up so fast I cracked my head on the pipe. The pain didn't register. "Daddy, you need to come get me. Please come now." Her voice was shaking. My chest tightened. "Where's Mommy?" "She went to the store with Uncle Trevor. He said I was being bad and maybe I should sleep outside tonight." "Daddy, I don't want to sleep outside." Trevor, Lindsey's brother, the guy who'd been helping out more and more lately, showing up at family dinners with his opinions about everything from Sophie's bedtime to my career choices. The same guy who'd made snide comments about my consulting work, calling it playing soldier for corporations. "Sophie, listen to me carefully. Are you safe right now? Are you in the house?" "Yes, but Uncle Trevor said when they get back..." She started crying. I was already moving, grabbing my keys, my wallet. "I'm coming right now, baby. Stay inside and lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me, okay?" "Okay, Daddy. Hurry." The line went quiet. I stared at the phone for half a second, then sprinted to my truck. Lindsey's sister Amanda lived 45 minutes away in the suburbs. I made it in 28 minutes, my mind racing faster than the speedometer. Trevor threatening to make my 4-year-old daughter sleep outside? What kind of twisted power trip was that? I'd never liked the guy. He was one of those people who confused being loud with being right, who thought intimidation was the same as leadership. He'd been unemployed for the better part of 2 years, living off Amanda's teacher salary while he figured things out. Lately, that seemed to involve inserting himself into my family's business. Amanda's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, all manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. I pulled into the driveway behind Lindsey's Honda and noticed Trevor's beat-up Camaro parked on the street. The front door was locked. I knocked. "Sophie, it's Daddy." The door flew open and 40 pounds of terrified little girl launched into my arms. Sophie was still in her pajamas, her dark hair messy from sleep, tears streaking her cheeks. "Daddy, you came." "Of course I came." I held her tight, breathing in that little kid smell of strawberry shampoo and innocence. "Where is everyone?" "Uncle Trevor's in the kitchen. Mommy and Aunt Amanda went to get groceries." I carried Sophie inside, my jaw clenching as I heard Trevor's voice from the kitchen, talking loudly on his phone about some get-rich-quick scheme involving cryptocurrency. The guy was 35 years old and still talked like he was going to be discovered by a talent scout. He looked up when I walked in, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. Trevor was bigger than me, maybe 6'2" and soft around the middle, with the kind of beard that was trying too hard to look rugged. Well, well, look who decided to show up. He ended his phone call and leaned back in his chair like he owned the place. "Didn't expect to see you here, Ben." Funny thing about that. I kept my voice level, Sophie still in my arms. My daughter called me, scared out of her mind. "Something about sleeping outside?" Trevor shrugged. "Kid needs to learn some discipline. She was throwing a tantrum about breakfast, acting like a spoiled brat. I told her maybe she'd appreciate having a roof over her head if she spent a night without one." The casual way he said it made my hands shake. I set Sophie down gently. "Sophie, go pack your things. You're coming home with me." "She's not going anywhere." Trevor stood up, crossing his arms. "Lindsey left me in charge while she's out. The kid stays here." "The kid," I said, stepping closer, "is my daughter. And you just threatened to make a 4-year-old sleep outside because she didn't want to eat her cereal." "I didn't threaten anything. I was teaching her a lesson about gratitude." "By terrorizing her?" Trevor's face reddened. You know what your problem is, Ben? You're soft. That kid walks all over you, and Lindsey too. Someone needs to show her how the real world works. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I took another step forward. In my peripheral vision, I could see Sophie watching from the hallway, her little backpack clutched in her hands. The sight of her scared face made something cold and calculating settle in my chest. Here's how the real world works, I said quietly. You ever threaten my daughter again in any way, and you'll discover exactly what 12 years in the Navy taught me about dealing with bullies. Trevor laughed, but it sounded forced. Oh, what? You're going to fight me? Real mature, soldier boy. I don't need to fight you. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. I just need you to repeat what you told Sophie about sleeping outside. Go ahead, say it again. His confidence wavered. Put that thing away. Say it again, Trevor. Tell me how you think it's appropriate to threaten a 4-year-old with homelessness as punishment for not eating breakfast. It wasn't a threat. It was just what? Just you being a pathetic loser who gets his kicks scaring little girls? I kept the phone recording. You know what I think? I think you're exactly the kind of person who peaked in high school and never figured out how to be a man. Screw you, Ben. You don't know anything about me. I know you're 35 and unemployed. I know you live off your sister's income while playing big shot with other people's kids. I know you just made my daughter cry because you wanted to feel powerful. I stepped back, still recording. And now I know you're too much of a coward to own up to it. Trevor's face was purple now. You think you're so much better than me? You think being in the military makes you special? You're just another washed-up veteran playing dress-up for corporate clients? Maybe. But I've never threatened to make a child sleep outside. I stopped the recording and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Sophie, let's go. As we headed for the door, Trevor called after us. Lindsey's going to hear about this. You can't just take Sophie whenever you feel like it. I turned back. Actually, I can. It's called being her father. You should look into it sometime. Sophie was quiet during the drive home, curled up in her car seat with her stuffed elephant. About halfway there, she spoke up. Daddy? Is Uncle Trevor mad at me? No, baby. Uncle Trevor isn't mad at you. He's having a hard time being a grown-up. Are you mad at me? I caught her eyes in the rearview mirror. I could never be mad at you for calling me when you were scared. That's exactly what you should do. Always. She nodded solemnly. Uncle Trevor said I was being a baby. You're 4 years old. You're supposed to be a baby sometimes. I pulled into our driveway and turned to look at her. And even when you're not a baby anymore, if someone scares you or makes you feel unsafe, you call me. Deal? Deal. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, I sat in my home office and played back the recording. Trevor's voice came through clearly, admitting to threatening Sophie, calling her spoiled, defending his actions. But it was his comment about Lindsey that stuck with me. Lindsey left me in charge. Since when did my wife leave her brother in charge of our daughter? Since when did Trevor have any authority in Sophie's life at all? I opened my laptop and started typing up a summary of the day's events, complete with timestamps and Sophie's exact words. 12 years in military intelligence had taught me the value of documentation. I had a feeling I was going to need it. My phone buzzed with a text from Lindsey. Trevor said you came and got Sophie. What's going on? I stared at the message for a long time before responding. Ask Trevor what he told our daughter about sleeping outside. Then ask yourself why you left him alone with her. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, we'll talk when I get home. I set the phone aside and pulled up my contact list. My old Navy buddy Marcus lived about an hour away, still active duty but always good for advice. If this thing with Trevor escalated, I wanted someone in my corner who understood both tactics and family drama. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. Trevor's behavior today wasn't just inappropriate, it was calculated. He'd waited until Lindsey and Amanda were gone. He'd isolated Sophie and used fear as a weapon against a 4-year-old. The question was, why? What did Trevor gain from terrorizing my daughter? I had a feeling I was about to find out. Sunday morning brought rain and revelations. Lindsey came home around 10, her face set in that particular expression I'd learned to recognize over 7 years of marriage, the one that meant she'd already decided who was wrong before hearing the story. Sophie was in the living room, building a fort out of couch cushions and singing to herself. Normal kid behavior, happy kid behavior, the kind of thing that should have made any reasonable adult question Trevor's version of events. "We need to talk," Lindsey said, hanging up her jacket. "Yes, we do." I gestured toward the kitchen, away from Sophie's ears. Lindsey followed me, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Even on a rainy Sunday, she was put together. Hair perfect, makeup subtle but precise, wearing clothes that probably cost more than most people's grocery budget. She'd always been beautiful, but lately there was something calculated about it, like she was dressing for an audience I wasn't part of. "Trevor told me what happened yesterday," she began. "Good. Then you know he threatened to make our 4-year-old daughter sleep outside as punishment for not wanting to eat breakfast." She sighed, that particular sigh that meant I was being unreasonable. "That's not what happened, Ben. Sophie was having a complete meltdown, throwing food, screaming at Amanda. Trevor was trying to help her understand that tantrums have consequences. By threatening homelessness? By explaining that having a warm, safe home is a privilege, not a right. It's called teaching gratitude." I stared at her. "Lindsey, she's 4. 4-year-olds don't understand abstract concepts about privilege. They understand threats. And your brother threatened her. You're being dramatic." "Am I?" I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Trevor's voice filled the kitchen, admitting to everything, defending his actions, calling Sophie spoiled. Lindsey's expression didn't change. "You recorded him? Without his permission?" "I documented him admitting to threatening our daughter. That's what any responsible parent would do. What any paranoid parent would do." She crossed her arms. "Ben, I'm worried about you. This obsession with being right all the time, with controlling every situation." The words hit like a physical blow. "Obsession with being right? Lindsey, he made our daughter cry. She called me, terrified, begging me to come get her." "She called you because she knew you'd take her side. She's learned that when she doesn't get her way, Daddy will come rescue her." "From what?" "From being parented by your unemployed brother who has no business disciplining anyone's child." Lindsey's face flushed. "Trevor's going through a rough patch. He's family, and he loves Sophie. He has a funny way of showing it. You know what? I can't do this anymore." She turned toward the door. "I can't keep defending every decision I make to you. I can't keep walking on eggshells because you might disapprove." "Walking on eggshells? Lindsey, what are you talking about?" But she was already leaving the kitchen. I heard her talking to Sophie in the living room, her voice bright and cheerful, asking about the fort. Then the front door opened and closed. I stood alone in the kitchen, rain pattering against the windows, trying to process what had just happened. My wife had just defended her brother's threat against our daughter and somehow made me the villain for objecting to it. That afternoon, while Sophie napped, I did something I'd never done before. I went through Lindsey's things. Not her personal items. I wasn't looking for evidence of an affair or anything like that. But I wanted to understand this sudden closeness with Trevor, this willingness to let him parent our child. In her home office, I found a stack of papers on her desk. Credit card statements, bank records, tax documents, normal stuff, except for one thing. A series of cash withdrawals over the past 3 months, 500 here, 300 there, always in round numbers, always from ATMs near Amanda's house. I photographed the statements with my phone, then put everything back exactly as I'd found it. That evening, Lindsey came home with takeout from Sophie's favorite restaurant, a peace offering, or maybe a distraction. We ate dinner like a normal family, talking about Sophie's upcoming preschool graduation, summer plans, ordinary things that felt strange after the morning's confrontation. After Sophie went to bed, I tried again. Lindsey, can we talk about Trevor? Not argue, just talk. She was loading the dishwasher, her movements sharp and efficient. What's to talk about? You've made your feelings clear. My feelings are that I don't want him alone with Sophie anymore, not after yesterday. And my feelings are that you're being controlling and paranoid. She slammed a plate into the rack. Trevor made a poor choice of words, but his heart was in the right place. His heart was in the right place when he made our daughter think she might have to sleep outside. She wasn't actually going to sleep outside, Ben. It was a teaching moment that got out of hand. A teaching moment. I sat down at the kitchen table. Lindsey, when did you start talking like a parenting blog? She turned to face me, and for a moment I saw something flicker in her expression. Uncertainty, maybe even guilt. But it was gone so fast, I might have imagined it. When did you start questioning every decision I make about our daughter? When those decisions started involving your brother threatening her? One incident, Ben. One poorly handled moment, and you want to ban him from her life. I want to protect her from people who think fear is an appropriate parenting tool. Lindsey dried her hands on a dish towel, her movements deliberate and controlled. You know what I think? I think this isn't really about Trevor at all. I think you're looking for reasons to control who Sophie spends time with because you can't control anything else in your life. The accusation stung because it was partially true. My consulting business was struggling, had been for months. Corporate security contracts were drying up as companies cut costs, and I'd been too proud to tell Lindsey how bad things had gotten. This isn't about control, I said. It's about our daughter's safety and emotional well-being. According to you. According to the recording of Trevor admitting he threatened her. Lindsey threw the dish towel on the counter. You know what? Record this. I'm Sophie's mother, and I get to decide who's safe for her to be around. If you don't trust my judgment, that says more about our marriage than it does about Trevor. She left the kitchen, and a few minutes later, I heard the shower running upstairs. I sat at the table, staring at the takeout containers, trying to make sense of what felt like a fundamental shift in my relationship with my wife. We'd disagreed before, of course, but never like this. Never with her defending someone who'd frightened our child. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Your wife's got good taste in restaurants. Sophie looked happy tonight. The message was accompanied by a photo. Lindsey and Sophie at the restaurant earlier, taken from outside through the window. I called the number immediately. It went straight to voicemail. You've reached Trevor. Leave a message. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I screenshot the text and added it to the growing file on my phone. Trevor wasn't just inappropriate with Sophie. He was watching us, following us, and somehow I was the one being called paranoid. Upstairs, the shower was still running. I opened my laptop and started researching restraining orders, custody modifications, and documentation requirements for family court. If Lindsey wouldn't protect Sophie from Trevor, I would, even if it meant protecting her from Lindsey too. The rain kept falling, and I kept planning. Monday brought clarity in the form of Mrs. Patterson, our 70-year-old neighbor who missed nothing and forgot even less. I was loading Sophie into my truck for preschool when she appeared at the fence between our properties, coffee mug in hand. Morning, Ben. Heard some raised voices yesterday. Mrs. Patterson had been a family court clerk for 30 years before retiring. She understood the value of accurate information. Just a family disagreement, I said, buckling Sophie's car seat. That brother-in-law of yours was here Saturday night, you know. After you got back with the little one. Sat in his car for about an hour, just watching your house. I stopped what I was doing. Saturday night? What time? Around 9. I was watching the news, saw headlights that didn't move, looked out and there he was, engine running, just sitting there. Did you see him leave? Eventually. But he came back Sunday morning early, before your wife got home, parked down the street that time, but same car. Sophie was singing to herself in the back seat, oblivious to the conversation. I kept my voice low. Mrs. Patterson, if you ever see him around here when I'm not home, I'll call you first, police second. She sipped her coffee. That boy's got problems, Ben. I've seen his type in court plenty of times. After dropping Sophie at preschool, I drove to my office, a small suite in a business park that I shared with an accountant and a real estate agent. I needed to think, and I needed to do it somewhere Lindsey couldn't walk in on me. The cash withdrawals bothered me. $5,000 over 3 months, always in amounts just under the reporting threshold, always near Amanda's house. Either Lindsey was developing a serious gambling problem, or she was giving Trevor money. I called my bank and requested detailed statements for our joint accounts. Then I called my lawyer. Ben, good to hear from you, Mike Chen said. How's the family? That's actually why I'm calling. I need some advice about documenting potential threats to my daughter. I explained the situation, played him the recording, told him about the surveillance and the cash withdrawals. Mike listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. Okay, he said when I finished. First thing, you did right getting that recording. Washington's a 2-party consent state for phone calls, but not for in-person conversations where there's no expectation of privacy. Kitchen conversation with witnesses around? That's admissible. Good to know. Second thing, the surveillance is concerning, but not necessarily illegal unless he's on your property or making explicit threats. However, combined with the threat to your daughter, it establishes a pattern of intimidating behavior. What about the money? That's trickier. If it's coming from joint accounts, your wife has every right to withdraw it. But if she's funding someone who's threatening your child, that could be relevant in a custody hearing. Custody hearing. The words made my stomach clench. Mike, I don't want to divorce my wife. I just want to protect my daughter. I understand, but Ben, you need to prepare for the possibility that those might not be compatible goals. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the rain-streaked windows. In 12 years of military service, I'd faced armed insurgents, handled critical situations, and made choices that carried immense consequences. Yet nothing had prepared me for the thought that my own wife might side with her unstable brother instead of protecting our daughter. My phone rang. Lindsey. Ben, we need to talk. Can you come home? I'm working. What's wrong? Just come home. Please. The drive back felt longer than usual. Lindsey's Honda was in the driveway, along with Trevor's Camaro and Amanda's Prius. A family meeting, apparently. I found them in the living room, Lindsey on the couch, Amanda in the armchair, Trevor standing by the window like he was keeping watch. The staging felt deliberate, like an intervention. Sit down, Ben, Lindsey said. I remained standing. What's this about? Amanda spoke first. Ben, we're concerned about your behavior this weekend. The way you spoke to Trevor, the recording, taking Sophie without discussing it with anyone. I took my daughter away from someone who threatened her. I'm not sure what there is to discuss. See? Trevor gestured at me. This is exactly what I'm talking about. He's completely unreasonable. What you're talking about? I looked at each of them in turn. What exactly have you been talking about? Lindsey shifted uncomfortably. We're worried about your mental state, Ben. The paranoia, the controlling behavior, the way you've been isolating yourself. Isolating myself? When's the last time we had friends over? When's the last time you wanted to go to a family gathering without finding some excuse to leave early? The questions caught me off guard because they weren't entirely wrong. I had been withdrawing, but not for the reasons she was implying. I've been working, I said, building a business, trying to provide for my family. A business that's failing, Trevor said. Amanda told me about the money problems. I turned to my sister-in-law. You told him about our finances? Amanda flushed. Lindsey's worried about you, Ben. She needed someone to talk to. So she talked to the unemployed brother who's been taking money from our joint account? The room went silent. Lindsey's face went white. How did you... She started. Bank statements. $5,000 in 3 months, Lindsey. All withdrawn near Amanda's house, all in cash. I pulled out my phone and showed them the photos. Want to explain that? Trevor stepped forward. You went through her private papers? I went through statements for accounts with my name on them. Statements that show my wife has been secretly funding someone who threatens our daughter. I wasn't funding anything, Lindsey said quickly. Trevor needed help with some expenses. What expenses? He doesn't work. He doesn't pay rent. What exactly did he need $5,000 for? No one answered. I looked around the room at these 3 people who'd apparently been discussing my mental health and my fitness as a parent, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. Trevor, you're going to stay away from my daughter, completely. No family gatherings, no visits, no contact of any kind. You can't dictate who Sophie sees, Amanda protested. Actually, I can. I'm her father, and I have legal authority to protect her from people who threaten her safety. One misunderstanding, Trevor began. One recorded admission of threatening a 4-year-old, followed by surveillance of my home, followed by this little ambush. I gestured around the room. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is a pattern. I turned to Lindsey. And you're going to explain to me why you've been secretly giving him money, or I'm going to assume the worst. The worst? Her voice was small. That you're more concerned with enabling your brother than protecting our daughter. I left them sitting there and went upstairs to pack a bag for Sophie and myself. Whatever was happening in my marriage, whatever dysfunction had taken root in my wife's family, my daughter wasn't going to be exposed to it anymore. When I came back downstairs, only Lindsey remained. Where are you going? She asked. Somewhere safe. You can reach me on my cell when you're ready to put Sophie's welfare ahead of Trevor's feelings. Ben, please, don't do this. I stopped at the door. I'm not doing anything except protecting our daughter. The question is, what are you doing? I picked up Sophie from preschool and drove to a hotel near the airport. It was clean, anonymous, and far enough from home that Trevor couldn't just show up. That night, while Sophie slept in the bed next to mine, I organized everything I knew into a timeline. The threats, the money, the surveillance, the family meeting, designed to make me look unstable. I was starting to see the shape of something larger, something that went beyond Trevor's inappropriate behavior. But I needed more information before I could prove it. I needed to know what Trevor was really doing with that money, and why my wife was so determined to protect him. The answers, I suspected, were going to change everything. Tuesday morning brought a call from Lindsey at 6:30 a.m., her voice tight with controlled panic. Ben, you need to bring Sophie home. I've been up all night worrying. I was already awake, sitting by the hotel window with coffee and my laptop, watching Sophie sleep. She'd asked 3 times the night before when we were going home, and I'd run out of ways to explain why we couldn't. She's safe, Lindsey. That's what matters. Safe from what? From her own family? From Trevor. Yes. A long pause. Then, he's gone, Ben. He left yesterday after you did. Drove back to Seattle. Trevor lived in Seattle, 2 hours north. I'd forgotten that detail, which bothered me. A good intelligence officer never forgets basic facts about potential threats. For how long? I don't know. Maybe permanently. He was pretty upset about the accusations. The accusations that I have recordings to support? Another pause. Ben, can we please just talk? face to face, without lawyers or recordings or whatever this has become? Sophie was stirring, making the small sounds that meant she'd be awake soon. I needed to make a decision. Okay, but not at the house, somewhere public. We met at a coffee shop near Sophie's preschool, one of those chain places with overstuffed chairs and the constant hiss of espresso machines. Sophie was delighted to see her mother, climbing into Lindsey's lap like nothing had happened. "Mommy, we stayed in a hotel. It had a pool." "That sounds fun, baby." Lindsey's eyes met mine over Sophie's head. "Did you swim?" "Daddy said maybe later. We were too busy talking about grown-up stuff." I'd spent an hour the night before trying to explain family dynamics to a 4-year-old, with limited success. How do you tell a child that sometimes adults make bad choices without destroying her faith in the adults she depends on? "Sophie, why don't you go pick out a cookie?" I gave her a $5 bill. "Something with lots of sprinkles." She skipped off to the counter, and Lindsey and I were alone. "She seems okay," Lindsey said. "She's resilient. Kids are." I sipped my coffee. "But she shouldn't have to be resilient about threats from family members." "I know. You're right about that." Lindsey's admission surprised me. "Trevor, he's not good with children. He never has been." "Then why leave him alone with Sophie?" "Because Amanda asked me to. Because he's been struggling, and she thought spending time with Sophie might help him feel more connected to the family." At Sophie's expense. I didn't realize he'd say something like that to her. I studied my wife's face, looking for tells. In the military, reading people had been part of the job, knowing when someone was lying, when they were scared, when they were holding back information. Lindsey was holding back something. "What about the money?" I asked. She flinched. "What about it?" $5,000, Lindsey. What was it really for?" "I told you, he needed help with expenses." "What expenses?" "Legal fees." The words came out in a rush. "He's been having some legal problems and he needed money for a lawyer." "What kind of legal problems?" "I can't. Ben, he made me promise not to tell anyone." "I'm not anyone. I'm your husband." Sophie was at the counter, seriously considering her cookie options with the patience of a 4-year-old faced with an important decision. We had maybe 2 more minutes of privacy. "Trevor got arrested," Lindsey said quietly, 6 months ago, in Seattle. "For what?" "Harassment. His ex-girlfriend filed charges, said he was stalking her, threatening her." The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm. "And you gave him money for a lawyer?" "The charges were dropped. It was all a misunderstanding. Or his lawyer was good enough to make them go away." I leaned forward. "Lindsey, you gave money to someone with a harassment charge to help him pay legal fees, then left him alone with our daughter?" "The charges were dropped," she repeated. "That doesn't mean he didn't do it. That means they couldn't prove it in court." Sophie was walking back with a cookie the size of a dinner plate, covered in rainbow sprinkles and wearing a huge smile. Normal kid joy, the kind that made everything else seem manageable. "Look, Daddy, it's got every color." "That's perfect, baby, just like you." She giggled and settled back into Lindsey's lap, breaking off pieces of cookie and offering them to both of us. For a moment, we looked like a normal family having a normal morning. "Ben," Lindsey said quietly, "I need you to come home. We need to work this out. I need you to promise me that Trevor won't be around Sophie anymore. He's in Seattle. That's not a promise." She was quiet for a long time, watching Sophie demolish her cookie with the focused intensity of a demolition expert. "I promise," she said finally. "No more Trevor and Sophie time. And no more secret money transfers. And no more secret money transfers." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that we could go back to being a normal family, that this had all been a misunderstanding that got out of hand. But something in her voice, in the way she wouldn't quite meet my eyes, told me there was more to the story. That afternoon we went home. Sophie ran through the house like she'd been gone for weeks instead of one night, checking on her toys, her room, her fort in the living room. Everything was exactly as she'd left it, which seemed to reassure her that the world was still predictable. Lindsey and I moved around each other carefully like dancers learning new choreography. Polite, cautious, both of us trying to find our way back to normal. But normal felt different now. Every conversation had an undercurrent of tension. Every silence felt loaded with unspoken questions. That evening, after Sophie was asleep, I did something I'd never done before. I called Amanda. "Ben, is everything okay? I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." A pause. "Okay. What exactly did Trevor get arrested for in Seattle? Lindsey told you about that?" "She told me it was harassment. She didn't tell me the details." Another pause, longer this time. "Ben, I think you should talk to Lindsey about this." "I'm talking to you. What aren't you telling me?" "It wasn't just harassment," Amanda said finally. "There were other charges. Trespassing, violation of a restraining order, something about threatening text messages." "And they were all dropped?" "His lawyer got them reduced to a misdemeanor harassment charge, and then the victim decided not to testify." "The victim decided, or the victim was convinced to change her mind?" "I don't know. I wasn't there." But her tone suggested she had her suspicions. "Amanda, is there anything else I should know? Anything that might affect Sophie's safety?" "Ben, I love my brother, but I wouldn't leave him alone with my kids. That's all I can say." She hung up, leaving me standing in my kitchen with more questions than answers. I looked up the stairs toward Sophie's room, where my daughter was sleeping peacefully, trusting that the adults in her life would keep her safe. Tomorrow, I decided, I was going to find out exactly what Trevor had done in Seattle, and why Lindsey was so determined to protect him. Because Amanda's final comment had made one thing clear: I wasn't the only one who thought Trevor was dangerous. The question was, what was I going to do about it? Wednesday brought rain and a phone call that changed everything. I was in my office, supposedly working on a proposal for a corporate client, when my phone rang with a Seattle area code. "Is this Ben Harker?" "Yes. Who's this?" "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I got your number from a mutual friend who said you might be interested in information about Trevor Morrison." Trevor Morrison. I'd never heard his last name before. Lindsey and Amanda had always just called him Trevor, like he was still the little brother who never quite grew up. "What kind of information?" "The kind that might help you protect your family. Can we meet?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Seattle, across from a woman in her early 30s with short brown hair and tired eyes. Jennifer Walsh looked like someone who'd learned to be careful, who checked exits and kept her back to the wall. "Trevor Morrison was my boyfriend for 8 months, she began without preamble. "It took me 3 months after that to get him to leave me alone." She slid a manila folder across the table. Police reports, court documents, photos, text messages, everything I kept in case I needed it again. I opened the folder and immediately wished I hadn't. Photos of slashed tires, broken windows, threatening messages scrawled on a car windshield. Text messages that started romantic and devolved into threats, hundreds of them, documenting a descent into obsession. "How did you get my number?" "I hired a private investigator to keep track of Trevor after the charges were dropped. I needed to know if he was staying away from me." She sipped her coffee with shaking hands. "My investigator told me Trevor's been spending time in the suburbs, around Bellevue. When I heard he was involved with a family that had a young daughter." "You thought I should know." "I thought you should know that Trevor Morrison is dangerous, not just inappropriate or unstable, dangerous." I flipped through the police reports. The pattern was clear: escalating harassment, violation of restraining orders, threats that became increasingly specific and violent. Why were the charges dropped? His lawyer convinced the prosecutor that I was an unreliable witness. They found out I'd been treated for depression after my father passed away, and suddenly my testimony wasn't credible. Her voice was bitter. Amazing how mental health treatment becomes a weapon when someone wants to discredit you. But you kept all this. I kept everything. Because I knew he'd do it again, and next time maybe the victim would be someone who could fight back. I thought about Sophie, 4 years old and trusting, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. What would you do, I asked, if you found out he was around your child? I'd run, as far and as fast as I could. She leaned forward. Mr. Harker, I've seen what Trevor does when he fixates on someone. He doesn't let go, ever. I drove home through the rain, Jennifer's folder on the passenger seat like a loaded weapon. The documents painted a picture of systematic stalking, escalating threats, and a legal system that had failed to protect the victim. But they also gave me something I'd been lacking: proof. Lindsey was in the kitchen when I got home, making dinner and humming to herself. Sophie was at the table, coloring in a princess book and chattering about her day at preschool. A normal family scene, except nothing about our family was normal anymore. How was work? Lindsey asked without turning around. Interesting. I learned some things about your brother. She went still. What kind of things? The kind that explain why you've been giving him money and why Amanda wouldn't leave him alone with her kids. I set the folder on the kitchen counter. Sophie, why don't you go play in the living room for a few minutes? Mommy and Daddy need to talk. Can I watch cartoons? Sure, baby. Just for a little while. Sophie skipped off, and I heard the television come on. Lindsey was staring at the folder like it might explode. What is that? Police reports from Seattle, court documents, photos of what Trevor did to his ex-girlfriend. I opened the folder and spread the contents across the counter. 8 months of stalking, harassment, and threats. Want to explain why you thought this was someone safe to leave with our daughter? Lindsey's face went white as she looked at the photos. I didn't. He said it was just a misunderstanding. Look at the pictures, Lindsey. Look at the text messages. Does this look like a misunderstanding? She picked up one of the police reports, her hands shaking. I didn't know it was this bad. You knew enough to give him $5,000 for legal fees. You knew enough to lie to me about what he'd been arrested for. I wasn't lying. I was protecting family. You were protecting a stalker, at our daughter's expense. Lindsey sank into a chair, still staring at the documents. He's Amanda's brother. He's family. He's a predator, and you left him alone with Sophie. He would never hurt Sophie. She's just a child. Jennifer Walsh was just trying to break up with her boyfriend. That didn't stop him from threatening her for months. I gathered up the papers. Lindsey, I need you to understand something. Trevor Morrison is not welcome around our daughter anymore. Not for holidays, not for family gatherings, not ever. You can't just cut him out of Sophie's life. Watch me. I took the folder upstairs to my office and called Mike Chen. I need to file for a restraining order, I said when he answered. And I need to modify our custody agreement to specify that Sophie is never to be left alone with Trevor Morrison. What's happened? I told him about Jennifer Walsh, about the documents, about the pattern of escalating behavior. Mike listened without interrupting, occasionally asking for clarification. This is good, he said when I finished. Really good. With this documentation, we can get an emergency restraining order, probably within 24 hours. And custody? With evidence of your wife knowingly exposing your daughter to someone with a documented history of harassment and stalking? Yeah, we can modify custody. The question is how far you want to take this. I looked out my office window at the rain, thinking about Sophie downstairs watching cartoons, trusting that the adults in her life would keep her safe. As far as necessary to protect my daughter. Ben, you need to understand, if we file these motions, there's no going back. Your marriage is probably over. My marriage might already be over, but Sophie's safety isn't negotiable. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Lindsey and I sat in our living room like strangers. The folder of documents sat on the coffee table between us, a barrier made of paper and truth. "I never meant for any of this to happen," she said quietly, "but it did happen, and you chose to protect Trevor instead of Sophie. I chose to believe family over strangers. You chose to believe a lie over evidence." I gestured at the folder. "How long have you known, Lindsey? Really known?" She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Amanda told me some of it, after the arrest. She said there had been problems with Trevor and women before. And you still gave him money. He's my brother-in-law. He needed help. He needed consequences. Instead, you enabled him." Lindsey stood up, pacing to the window. "So what happens now? You file your restraining order, modify custody, and we pretend this family never existed? We protect our daughter from someone who's proven he can't be trusted around vulnerable people. And us? What happens to us?" I looked at my wife, this woman I'd loved for 7 years, who'd chosen her brother-in-law's comfort over our daughter's safety, and realized I didn't know her anymore. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I really don't know." The next morning, I filed for an emergency restraining order against Trevor Morrison. By afternoon, it was granted. But as I would soon discover, a piece of paper was only as strong as the person it was meant to restrain, and Trevor Morrison had never been good at following rules.